Romeo. This is my buddy Romeo, and Juliet is here, but she's on the couch. She might come over at some point. This is their roadmap to success. So basically, I was called in because Juliet, who is a puppy mill survivor, bit a relative who was here. Now, it was, from what I was told, I think that everything with Juliet, I don't see any signs whatsoever that she's an aggressive dog. What I think has happened, she got startled and was instinctive and reacted. The person who was sitting right next to her while she was asleep stood up and screamed and was very elated and happy about something, but it startled and scared her. Because she's a puppy mill dog who spent most of her first couple of years of her life in a cage that was basically this big by this big, and didn't have much interaction with people, doesn't know how to interact, and maybe isn't as well-rounded in terms of her socialization as he is, and so little things might set her off. And she just doesn't know how to process it. Just like us, when I don't understand how to do something, I get frustrated. When I'm frustrated, I might be snippy or a jerk to somebody. It's not that I'm a jerk, hopefully not a jerk, but it's more that a reactive to what's going on. So a hard rule that I would have for Juliet is that if anybody comes to visit, if there's anything that's going to cause them to be very elated or upset or emotional or any sort of spike in emotion, they can't do that while Juliet is asleep with them on the couch. So if they're on the couch, Julie gets up, they're petting, and Juliet falls asleep, and I'm going to look at a phone call, maybe it's some good news or some bad news, I'm going to get up and walk away before I do that. I'd also like the guests and everybody that's around to make sure that if we're doing anything around Juliet, that she's aware of what we're doing. So if she's asleep on the floor and I'm going to stand up, I might go, she looks at me, and then I stand up. I don't want her to be caught off guard. And I think if you follow those rules, you won't have any more bites from Juliet. All right, let's talk about the other stuff we talked about. We went over marker words. The marker word we use is yes. Later on today, I'd like you guys to walk around your house. Yes, give both dogs a treat with about 20 treats. I'd like you to do that 3 times a day today, 3 times a day tomorrow, and then you're done with that. So by the time you're watching this video, that should be done. And you can use kibble if they like their kibble. So yes, and put the treat in their mouth. Don't wait for them to look at you. If they're way far away, call them to you before you say yes. After you do this a little bit, they're going to follow you around. So yes, put the treats in their mouth. Take a couple steps, yes, treat in their mouth. I'd like you to do that in every room in your house. And if there's several steps between rooms, maybe once or twice in the hallway as well. I want them to know yes works all over the place. Yes. This is just a loading exercise to help the dogs understand that yes means I'm going to get a treat, but we're going to start using it in ways to indicate that the dog did what we want. We went over hand targeting, which the Guardian's doing a good job of doing right now behind the camera. So that's touching the dog's nose to your hand. Now remember, there's 4 components to a cue. The cue, sit. The action, the dog sitting down. The marker word, yes, to let the dog know it did what you wanted. And then the payment, which is a pet, attention, or a reward. But when we're that's 4 steps. When we're teaching a dog, we do the first step last. Yes. I went over hand targeting. We just chopped. The dog touched his nose or hand, said yes, and put the treat there. We didn't say touch yet. We just got the dog warmed up. So when you're training a dog, you want to lure the dog into the position and just use your marker when they are successful until you can easily lure them. When you're 90% certain, then at that point you can say sit, lure them into a sit, yes, and give them a treat. Now technically, once you can say sit and your dog sits, you don't need the marker word. My dogs are 7 and 10, and I use the marker words every single time. It just is a nice way for them to know for sure what it is you want. When you say yes, you are saying thank you for sitting, thank you for laying down, thank you for eye contact, thank you for dropping, thank you for not jumping up on the counter, or whatever it is. We also went over celebrating and what I call the manners lesson. Celebrating, long short of it, is just petting the dog when the dog offers behaviors that you don't like, just like this. Yes. I did not ask him to come to me, but he did, and I said yes and petted him. That makes him more likely to come to me again in the future. If he SATs, I would say yes and pet him again. Under the chin, which we'll talk about in a second. So the more that I reward him for desired behaviors, the more he's going to emulate those behaviors to get attention. The kicker is that all attention from us to dogs is rewarding. So yelling at your dog to stop pulling, jumping on a leash, stealing things is going to, I love the Guardians are correcting themselves now already. I can leave. But the great thing about it is all attention is rewarding for dogs. So if I say don't jump up, that's the same thing as giving a treat for jumping up. So instead, we want to use that in a positive capacity, and that's what I call celebrating. So every time the dog does any behavior that you want without you asking for it, say yes and pet them under their chin. If you have a treat, you can give a treat, but I generally don't give a lot of treats for celebrating unless something is unusual going on, like we're having a house full of people. Then I might celebrate, say yes, and reward with a treat as well. Most of the time, I just do it with just saying with a pet. Now, I say celebrate to other people in the house. If somebody says celebrate to me, I just say yes and pet the dog under their chin. I don't have any more time. You only have 2 seconds. By the time you say yes, I've got to be petting. Or by the time you say celebrate, I got to say yes and start petting. But be mindful. If the dog walks up to you, yes and pet, and then continue your conversation. Just like I did right there, I didn't interrupt what I was doing, but I did reinforce for the dog. Now, I also went over the manners lesson, which is Romeo was whining. He was also nudging. He was also jumping up for attention. Now, part of it is because he's jumping up his guardian who was petting him when he did that. Anything your dog is doing right before you pet them or give them attention is what you were specifically rewarding them for. So the dog jumps up, I would recommend, and you didn't ask for it, I recommend just crossing your arms across your chest and just be boring. Look away. When the dog gets down, tell them to do something else. Sit, yes and pet. Touch, yes and pet. Down, yes and pet. But if you freeze, they get down and you pet them for getting down, you only get that down pet is for jumping up first. That's called chaining behaviors. So your dog's offering something you don't want to do, like jumping up, you disengage. When they stop doing it, ask them to do something else, and then mark and reward that. So celebrating is rewarding the dogs when they choose to do something that we find desirable without us asking. Manners is if the dog is nudging us, demanding attention, we're going to cue them into a sit or a down. One time. They have 2 seconds to do it. If they do, then I say yes and pet them under the chin. If they don't do it, I just go back to reading the paper, watching TV, playing the piano, or whatever else it was. Half of how dogs learn is not doing what you want and not being rewarded. If you pet them just to be nice, you're confusing them. So after a while, what will happen is Romeo's going to be like, every time I sit, they're petting me. Every time I nudge them, they tell me to sit, and when I do it, I get petted, and if I don't do it, nothing happens. After a while, Romeo's going to start sitting in front of you to prepay for attention. When he does, make sure you pet him. Now, if he sits and you pet him, or he jumps up and you tell him to sit and he sits and you pet him, then you stop and you go back and he nudges you or barks again, does it again, he's saying, I'm bored. I need something to do. So take him out for a sniff walk. Play a game of fetch. Instigate a game of tug of war between the 2 dogs. Do a little bit of training. There's creative ways of exercising. Now, get the Omega Paw tricky treat ball, fill it up with kibble, and roll it around. Let them do that. Give them something to do. Just like kids, if they have too much energy, they can't learn. That's why we have gym class and recess. Same thing for dogs. So dog exercise is best done every 2 to 4 hours. Being Vizsla's, she doesn't have as much energy as Romeo does, so Romeo probably needs exercise every 2, 3, or 4 hours. But instead of a long walk, we'd have multiple short walks. And I'd recommend the guardian walk for time versus completing a circuit. So when you go out the door, take a right or left, and just set a timer. If I've got 15 minutes, I'm going to walk 7.5 minutes on this side of the block, and I let the dog go wherever it wants. Matter of fact, I lead the dog up to what it wants to sniff. And I just wait there for the dog to get done sniffing and then start walking away. When my buzzer goes off, I cross the street and I have 7.5 minutes to make my way home. I don't care if I only go half a house. My goal is not to complete a circuit. It's the duration. And if the dog's sniffing a lot, they're burning a lot more energy. Now, another little habit to get into is every time you get up and start walking, say, let's go. You're here, you're going to go to the bathroom, let's go. If you know the dogs are following you. And after a while, if the dog's sniffing and there's a reason why, you're getting get my off my lawn looks for somebody, you and your neighbors, you say, let's go. The dog pops his nose up and thinks we're going off to the next adventure. But it only works if you get in the habit of doing it. Same thing with celebrating and manners. These only work if you get in the habit of doing it. That's why I tell people, say celebrate to each other and then listen. Same thing with manners. Let me see. For exercise, also you can get a doggy harness with doggy backpack, as they're called, and put cans of bottles of water or bags of sand or something like that in it. For John, I would do it just for Romeo. That way his walk is more efficient. Just make sure after exercise they get 10 minutes to rest and recover before the guest arrives, before we get in the car and drive somewhere, before the next thing happens. Otherwise, they will be worse behaved. We also talked about other things you can do, mental stimulation, feeding out of a snuffle mat. The snuffle mat that I like is the one off of Amazon. It's called the Runda, R-H-U-N-D-A. And you can order that on Amazon. If you can't find it, let me know. Omega Paw Tricky Treat Ball is the orange ball that I showed you. They have a Sir Bob-a-lot. Should be easy for you guys to remember. Sir Bob-a-lot. It looks like a Kong, but it has a hole, and you put kibble in it. The dog has to knock it like a weeble wobble and get a couple pieces of kibble coming up. There's also, I have one that looks like a UFO dog toy. Look for it. And get one that's a good radius, probably about 12 or 18, 14 inches around. Stuff that full of food, and then the dog has to use his nose, figure out how to get those pieces of kibble to come out. It's a nice way to drain energy as well. So the idea, there's also, we went over Cookie in the Corner, and there's also mental stimulation games. Cookie in the Corner is kind of introduction, find it. So on a walk, every walk, pick a part of the block where there's nobody there, and tell Romeo, just make sure he's looking at the tree, say find it, and throw it on the grass. When he looks up, yes. When he looks at you, throw another one. And I'll do that for about 5 or 7 treats every block. So that way, if somebody's coming around the block, you know Romeo's going to be reactive. There's a bunch of squirrels across the street. You see him find it. He's looking this way instead of trying to get in trouble. So finding a good rhythm where you can alternate between physical exercise and mental stimulation, and that way the dog kind of is having its needs taken care of. Let me see. So message me if you have any questions about those, but try to kind of, sometimes it might be the number of fetches. And if I'm doing fetch, the way I do fetch is when the dog brings the ball to me, I hold the treat up to their lips. When they drop the ball, I say yes, put the treat in the mouth, and then basically hold the ball up, say sit. When he sits, I say fetch as I throw it, wait for him to get it, quietly pull out a treat without crinkling it back, or brings it back to me, hold the treat out, he drops it, yes, and put the treat in his mouth. And then I make him pick it up and say sit, and this time I make him wait 1 second before I throw it. Eventually I work my way up to maybe waiting 5 seconds. So we're helping him practice some impulse control. Instead of spazzing out on you, I'm sitting because I know eventually you're going to throw the ball. But if I go from 1 second to 10 seconds and he gets up, I waited too long. So we got to make it very short intervals in terms of our progression. If he jumps up on you, you can also use the hand targeting. Go like this, and the dog jump down to touch his nose to your hand. So there's a lot of little things that you can do redirecting your dog's attention and setting up for success by exercising or not exercising them. So make sure you kind of be mindful if you have guests coming over, get your dog some exercise first. Let me see, what else? We also went over dog body language and consent. Remember cutoff signals? And you're going to have to be very careful for Juliet. She was abused in a puppy mill dog. She has very subtle cutoff signals. But most common cutoff signals are the dog's ducking its head, kind of crouching, like, cowering, squinting its eyes, kind of in concert with the cower, turning away. The ears sometimes will rotate back. Sometimes they'll lick their lips. Sometimes they'll look at you from the side. We call this whale eye. Sometimes they'll refuse to come to you. Juliet might roll over and show you her belly. If you're asking Juliet to do something, she rolls over and shows you her belly. She's saying, I don't understand, and I'm really scared. Please don't hurt me. So that's how you should interpret it. Don't interpret it as I should pet you. You can pet her for that. That's okay. But I want you to interpret that she's fearful of whatever it is. At one point, the guardian wanted to put this harness on, and I watched for Romeo, who's not a fearful dog. The head was here, and he went like this, and Romeo backed up. And so what we did instead is I held this open like this. So the dog was where the camera is. I held the treat here and held it here, and Romeo stuck his head through here to get the treat. Eventually stuck his head through further and further. When I first do it, I'm usually taking my hand, and I'm putting my hand through it, so the dog's just approaching it. But gradually I'm pushing my hand through it less and less. This never moves. My hand moves to wherever I want, but I don't try to draw the dog back. I don't want to like put my hand in there and then draw it back while the dog's there. I go this far and I keep it here. The dog comes, I say yes and release the treat. Next time here, so on and so forth. Eventually you hold it here, the dog comes and shoves his hand on it, head through it. You say yes, give him a treat. Put one of his legs through, yes, give him a treat. Next leg through, yes, get a treat. Attach the leash, yes, get a treat. So all these steps are followed by getting a treat. I like having the harness put on. He wasn't given a huge cutoff signal, but he was backing away a little bit. If you're trimming your dog's nails and they pull their paw back, that's a way of saying I don't like that. If you're engaging with them and they try to pull away, let them go. As long as it's safe to do so, not when it's free. But the more we listen for our dog's cutoff signals and respond by not trying to pet them or interact with them, the more relaxed and comfortable they're going to feel. We also went over our dog's body language. Remember, look at those components, the ears, the head, the eyes, the tail. Message me if you can't remember these. But what you want to do is look for them when your dog's neutral, when there's nothing going on. Then when somebody's coming by that the dog really likes, celebrate. He missed an opportunity to celebrate for a sit. But when somebody comes by and you see your dogs are excited, what do the ears do then? What does the tail do then? How does the breathing and the leaning and all the rest of that fun stuff? So after a while, you know how to recognize your dog's body language when it's neutral. and then when it's happy. Then when you see something different, when you suspect the dog's fearful, you can start categorizing. The dog does this with its tail, this with its ears, and this is what the body looks like when it's scared. So then if I see any of those indicators, I'm going to move whatever it is the dog's fearful of away from the dog or move the dog away from it. So now the dog doesn't have to bark or lunge or do anything because people are listening to me and stopping and understanding how I feel emotionally. We also went over a number of, the importance of rules. So asking your dog to self-restrain. Sit before I let you out, open the door to let you out of the kennel. Sit before I prepare your food or before I put your food down. Sit before I invite you on the couch or whatever it is. Helping the dog practice a little bit of impulse control and listening to you can be really beneficial. A couple other cleanup things. When you're saying your marker words, say at the instant the dog does the action, not ever when you get the treat unless it's like cookie in the corner. That's a rare exception. So the dog sits, you say yes, then you reach for your treat. Don't say yes as you're reaching for the treat or your hand targeting. Don't say yes as you're putting the treat there. You chop, or you say the word touch, then you chop, the dog touches his nose, you say yes, then you reach for the treat and put it there. Make sure you're segmenting those things together so there's kind of a good order. Let me see, when I say the marker word, I don't say any other words for 5 seconds. The first word you say is the most important. So don't say, go to the bed, bed, sit, down, come. The more words we use, the harder it is for dogs to learn. I'd also like the guardians to sit down and make a list of all the official cues. A lot of times we say come, and here, and come here, over here, dog's boy. Those are all meaning the same thing. So if we just say one word, everybody uses the same word, it makes it easier for the dog to understand what we're doing, and that breeds confidence and security, and that can help insulate dogs who are normally insecure and uncomfortable. Get a snuffle mat. I think I already talked about that. I'm trying to think. Is there anything else you want me to go over? Is there anything else you want me to mention on this camera?
I don't know.
I think I've gotten most of it. Now, if there's anything I didn't go over that's not here, text or call me. I don't charge for phone calls or text. I want you to take advantage of me. I want you to not practice for 2 weeks and then say, David, we think we figured it out. Now you've practiced maybe perhaps incorrectly for 2 weeks. If you're not sure about something, shoot a little video and text it to me. My clients that get the best results are the ones that sit down and watch this video once a week until you watch this video. Everything in the video has been, you've adhered to it all. And if that's the case and you're still having issues, you want to work on something, let me know. If you want to teach him to walk with a loose leash, I'm happy to do that, but that's different than what we're doing today. What we're doing today is a behavior modification session to help make sure that dogs feel comfortable, secure, and confident, and that humans stop accidentally training the dogs to do what we don't want. So watch this video because there's a lot of stuff in here that you're, I forgot to say the marker word, forgot to do this, forgot to do that. When you watch this video, if you're doing everything and you're still having problems, call me and we'll come back and work on stuff at that point. But I want to make sure we get all of your money's worth out of this session first before we start booking any additional sessions. And for most of my clients, they don't need more after this session unless they're trying to do something like loose leash walking, which does take time. Now, if you do want to teach your dog how to go to the dog bed when somebody rings the door, or stay on the dog bed as you go to the door to answer it and all that fun stuff, you just don't have enough time to do that before the holidays. So that's something that would probably take about a month to train, but the video above this is a video where it does show you how to do that. So if you're having problems, just go to my website, go to the video directly above this one, and it'll show you how to do that in stages. I'm trying to think, I don't think that's pretty much everything. Let me see if I can do a good touch. Oh, I did forget one other thing. Positive interrupter. So I use the kissing sound. So let's say that Romeo is doing something we don't want him to do. I would go, touch. Yes. If he was sniffing the garbage or sniffing the counter and I say, make that kissing sound, he looks at me, and then I say touch, he runs over and touches his nose to my hand. I'm not giving him attention for doing what we want. I'm making an interesting sound. When he looks at me, I give him a cue that causes him to come to me, and I reward him for that. Now, if I don't give him something else to do, give him a carrot, or take him for a walk, or do some training or whatever, he's going to go right back to doing what he was doing before. This is a temporary, that's why we call it a positive interrupter. Sit, sit, sit. I just said sit 3 times. I don't advise doing that. So try to remember, so don't say yes, yes for your marker word. Try not to talk a lot to your dog. Just use one word cues, and then use the marker words to let the dog understand what it is you want him to do. So watch these videos. Let me know if you have any questions on them. Don't wait. I think that's pretty much it. So this is my buddy Romeo, and Juliet's over there sleeping on the couch, and this is Romeo and Juliet's roadmap to success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog. Only sometimes you mean it.